Thank you so much for turning into Beyond Should. I'm happy to have you here. I'm Lucy Reynolds, your host and the founder of the Murmuration Collective, where we empower women for lasting transformation in all facets of their life, both professionally and personally. And we get it. This is a dynamic and challenging time we're living through. And if you're feeling frustrated or out of control with your current work situation or life in general, and feel like something is just waiting for you just beyond your reach or clarity, then perhaps you might want to consider taking on a coaching engagement with us at the Murmuration Collective. We support women on the daily to wade through their confusion and find what they seek in the next chapters of their personal and professional lives. Our contact details are in the show notes. We look forward to meeting you and hearing what's going on for you. Now let's tune in together to this next episode of Beyond Should.
You know, we're using women's brains as the computers to run our families and our communities. How about we build an actual computer that is better built for it, and we can give our brains a break? For me, my point of view is not, oh my gosh, AI is like the best thing since sliced bread. My point of view is I've been toiling for 10 years in categories and spaces that are margin challenged, that don't pay the people doing the good work nearly enough, that are resource constrained in ways that most people can't even imagine. And if there is some way to unlock real solutions, well, I'm all for it. And for me, from what I can see, AI can be that thing. And so that's why I'm an advocate for it.
Hi, I'm Lucy Reynolds, and welcome to Beyond Should, a podcast for women reinventing their lives, their careers, and owning their power. This is a show where you'll gain insights on how to stop doing what you should do and finally start naming, claiming, and pursuing what you deeply want. On this week's episode of Beyond Should, I sat down with Avni Patel Thompson to talk about what happens when women stop waiting for somebody else to solve the problems they're living through and start building solutions themselves. We talk about motherhood, the invisible labor that comes with that, ambition, marriage, values, and why Avni believes women need to move beyond being consumers of technology and instead become the creators shaping it. She also shares the messy realities of building companies while raising a family and why meaningful lives are rarely perfectly balanced. Avni, welcome to Beyond Should. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Avni, I'm going to share a few bio points and then please fill in what else is missing or how you got to this point. But listeners, Avni is a serial founder building at the intersection of AI and societal impact. She is driven by figuring out how technology can help us live our most human lives, especially with the age-old structure like Village. Her latest company, Milo, was the first AI agent for families, tackling the invisible mental load of managing family life. Thank you again for being here. Tell us a little bit about how you got here and what's important to know about your journey so far. How did you get here?
Oh boy, there's a question. The first thing I'll just say is that the last 10 years of my founder journey, even though from this way looking backwards has all of these sort of like touch points, I would say it's actually been informed by a relatively selfish desire to solve the problems that I've been living in my life, and certainly the ones that I've been living after I became a parent. And so a lot of the journey before that has been, I was like kind of raised up in the sciences. I have a chemistry physics degree. I started at Procter & Gamble, though, my career. And so I fell in love with consumer problems before I even knew what that was. And I was really fortunate to be trained by the best. At Procter & Gamble, I was able to learn how to see consumer problems, not as people said them, but as they lived them. And that would include things like going into in-homes and like really understanding what lay in between the words of what they were saying and like what their actions actually had. And then fast forward, lots of different exciting experiences through getting an MBA and consulting and all of these really, living in China and the US. But throughout all of that was the red thread of like, I just really get lit up with this intersection of what are deep everyday consumer problems and friction that people live with, products that can solve it in delightful ways, and big businesses, because I really do think that capitalism can be a powerful force because when you build something that is worth paying for. And so at the intersection of that, I've always been really interested in playing there. And I hopped around to lots of different categories. I've worked on literally, like if you name it, I've probably done something, everything from like pharmaceuticals to grocery, athletic goods to beauty. until I became a parent. And then both my husband and I, we had landed in Seattle to get as close to my family in Vancouver as possible. My husband was at Amazon. I was at Starbucks. We had 2 young ones, like under 3. And for me, it was this question, wait a minute, how do people do this? Like, how literally do people do this?
Right.
Because the way that it felt was like, it felt like an impossible puzzle, no matter how you did it. What I got really, I call it rage curiosity, which is to say, it was just so frustrating and so confounding to me that you could take such a big problem. People were spending so much money on it and it still felt so broken. And so that's just caused me to start saying, okay, but why? And using my background both as a scientist and as a consumer product builder, I was like, well, let's go put all of that towards something that serves me. And so that's really what led me to my entrepreneurial journey. And then the last 10 years we can certainly talk about, but it's been over multiple chapters, really the same mission. And I would say I continue that same mission. It's this lens of how do we enable, I'm saying modern parenthood, but really what I understand that to mean now is just modern neighborhoods and communities and just like, in which families form like a really foundational part of it. How do we allow ourselves to be our most human kind of spaces, but in a modern version? And again, I'm going to be the scientist and sort of say things like first principles, but from a first principle standpoint, the village is a really interesting and important construct. We are a social species. We weren't meant to do this with 1, maybe 2 sets of shoulders. And so even whether it was Poppy and the childcare lens or Milo and the invisible load, I'm really interested through the lens of how do you share the load?
Right. I love that. We work with our clients quite a bit on building their board of advisors, right? Who can they tap into to ask for help, offload some burdens, take on some burdens, how can I help you? And so I love that village sensibility of we're all in this together, right? And how can we solve for one another? So I love this. Okay. So let's just get into this thing. We talk a lot about women are at the heart of building this village, right? I remember you and I talking earlier about we see where the problems are. We know what, how we would solve for it. But we don't actually think about taking ownership around knowing what the problem is, seeing where the solution is, and then actually bringing it to market. But you did this. And so I'd love to just talk about how women could shape more, take more ownership, more creativity around shaping technology. What are your thoughts on all this?
Yeah, many thoughts. I do want to name actually, like, women are incredibly creative at seeing problems and finding ways to solve it. The challenge is actually like quite structural in the sense of, again, women are called to be the glue that keeps a lot of things together. And so what that means is, what is our extra capacity? Well, there is very little extra capacity. This is stuff that I've had to like look into and do research on and understand. And I wish it weren't a gendered thing, but the data is sort of overwhelming in this direction. But as we think about our boys that grow into men, like there are structural spaces, whether you talk about sports or gaming or other kinds of like, even just like think about like man cave or like the den or whatever else it is. There are spaces and structures that are designed to help like men continue to have sort of like tinkering spaces. When we think about women, that's not necessarily the same, right? So there's like a lot of the care work, whether before you even partnered up or have families, there is a lot of this kind of expectation and a lot of the sort of like the spaces get filled by this. And so I just want to name that just because that ends up being the distance between noticing and understanding problems really well and living them, and then the chasm that has to be crossed to be able to go solve them in a way that requires resources, and resources can be money. It can be before now, like, engineers, if you're going to build something software, or it could be something else like it, and it's time, right? So all of those pieces are kind of the things that I've seen that lie in the gap, not capability, not ability to see it or build it or any of those types of things. But that's a distance. A lot of the folks who are now the technical builders are my age, but when they were growing up, they were tinkering on, like, they were coding and they were like teaching themselves how to code and they were video gaming. That just wasn't something that I was doing. And so even though I got a technical degree, I have to walk around saying I'm non-technical because I don't code. And that's for me is like another language. So a lot of the parts that I like to focus on is I really do, and this is certainly not gendered, I really do believe in the people that live closest to the problem are going to be the best suited to then understand the intricacies of how it needs to be solved. And so that in these cases happened to we women. But ever since I started my career at Procter & Gamble in my early 20s, like I've understood that the rooms in which the people who are doing the building and the designing don't necessarily reflect who they're designing or building for. And that doesn't always have to be bad. My first product that I built or worked on was for osteoporosis. So as a 21-year-old, 22-year-old, I was building for a consumer who is like 60 plus, right? So that doesn't need to be the case that you have to be the person who, like, you're solving the problem. That said, you then have to work extra hard to get the empathy to understand what the people live. So you're not like othering it. And so that's a little bit, we can certainly dig into that a little bit more. When we talk about parenthood and all the different things that often women are carrying, the invisible parts of it become really important.
Let's talk about that. But I do want to kind of go back really quickly to thinking about the structural spaces. So one of the ways you and I were connected was through our friend Amy. And I believe that you are in the Lotus Ladies with Amy. And tell us a little bit about the Lotus Ladies. And do you lean into creating structures around women supporting women, where you riff, where you get to, you all help and tinker with problems and problem solving? I mean, talk to us about how you surround yourself. We are going to talk about the family and the ways with which you are helping create and solve problems for the modern family using tech. But talk to us a little bit about this group, the Lotus Ladies, and other structures where you've created so that you can riff and tinker and be supported.
There was a group of us that had been attending the TED conference for the last 3-4 years. You know, like everyone has these moments where there's just like a spark that then continues. There's some similar sparks that don't, and then that's totally fine. This one, just with that small group of women who are both, like, they're all of them so incredibly generous and badass in their own ways. To be honest, like this specific group really convenes in like, you know, one time a year around the TED conference, at which point it super spikes and then it kind of then quiets. But what has been incredible over 3 years is knowing that you have access to or the support of these incredible women who are doing incredible things in their own right. And you have that as a safe space to like dream big and like take big swings. And then know that you have other folks that are like willing to not only champion it and support it, but actively bust down barriers and make introductions and support it in not just a like, I support you kind of way, which is important, but in a let me go bust some hurdles so that you can actually get to where you need to faster. I'll be honest to say, in my journey, I've, you know, from like a chemistry degree to like consulting to MBA and, you know, the ratio, and especially in tech, the ratios have never been in my favor, and like from a women's standpoint, but that's never been necessarily an issue. It's certainly something that I want to advocate for and shed light on, but I've never felt like that was something that ever hindered me. The last 10 years in tech has certainly been like a more extreme version of that, but I haven't necessarily found until the last like probably 3 or 4 years, groups of women in which I can find like this incredible kind of strength. And so this group is one of them. There's another group that is based in the Bay Area that is also an incredible group of women who support each other. And also maybe the most critical thing for me is this group allows you to show up in all of your messy, imperfect ways and understand the flavor, the kind of like the color of your ambition and all the rest of that imperfectness. And then they kind of meet you there. It doesn't matter what it is. And there's so many different backgrounds and like life stages and whether you have a family or not, or all of those types of things. That's not the point. And it isn't until the last couple of years that I've realized how very powerful that is.
Yeah, you and I hadn't really planned to talk about this, but I actually want to stay here for a minute because what do you think's different? Because I've noticed this too. I mean, I think in the last 5 years, women are together. We are raising each other up. And I just love this. You can show up your whole messy self. And I love the color. They meet the color of your ambition.
Post-COVID, this is also my post-therapy, be willing to be vulnerable, willing to not put up with things in my life that I'm not, I'm just to have no more time for. So I think all of these things, I don't know how much that connects to other people's journeys, but that's certainly a part of mine.
Definitely resonates with me. Absolutely.
This is the phase where I both started therapy. I made a commitment to myself that I want to know myself better than I ever have before. But that requires a sort of radical self-reflection that is deeply uncomfortable. But if you want to do that, then there are other people thankfully, who also want to do that. And so for me, this other women's group that I'm talking about, that is the basis actually of what this is. It's less about what you do professionally. I actually don't know what most of the women do professionally, but they are all
contributing in the world and making impact no matter what.
Exactly. Yeah. Badass is the word that is always in my head.
They're engaged in their living. Yeah.
They're engaged in their living, but I think that's the point, which is they're engaged in their living. But I think we're all at this phase, or maybe as COVID broke us or whatever else it is, but we're no longer willing to play the performative game.
Yes.
And so it is what is real and true. And I'm going to put it out there. And if it is not for you, that is totally cool. But if it is, then let's go play. Right. And I think that stance has freed me to actually spend more time on the things and the people and the places that I really deeply believe in. And for me, in the last 2 years in the Bay, we moved to a new place. That has meant coaching girls football. That has meant showing up in city council things and advocating for things that are in our community and things that I would have never thought about even 5 years ago. And this journey has allowed me to do that. But then these groups, it's not necessarily the advice about what would women who maybe don't have that would do. I think that's a hard one because I've looked for some of these. I actually think they exist, the people exist.
Right.
And the challenge is sending out a beacon. And what does that beacon look like?
Well, what I love about it is that you're creating, village, building village. So let's move to building village from a tech standpoint. Shall we do that? So I would love for you to talk about, you've said that technology is already presuming our values. What values do you think tech is currently shaping the system that we live inside? What's going on here and what drove you crazy about that?
I think a lot of the challenges of the last 5, 10, 15 years is because the path to growth, the path to impact, the path to changing the status quo, which is frankly the thing you need to do when you're a startup, you have nothing. You have no momentum. You have no power. You have none of that. And you are trying to bend reality in your favor. And so I will say that is not value laden, right? I was trying to do the same as a founder. That is my job. I am trying to imagine a future that I want to live in that is better in these kinds of ways. And I'm trying to impose my will onto the world to make that so.
Right.
So that's sort of okay, that's what the job of startups is. What has happened is because of a combination of the types of business models that have been funding these kinds of products, the kinds of products that have been built, we now have this lump thing called tech with a capital T that is driven predominantly by a business model of attention, which is paid for by third parties, but monetized on the user. So let's take anything like Netflix. Well, Netflix is paid, but that's a separate kind of thing, the endless kind of consumption, because that then enables the business model. But if you think about the YouTubes or the Facebooks or Instagrams, et cetera, again, there's one of the core metrics is time in app, right? And so the greater you have time in app, the greater ad, like, real estate, all of those types of things. It all makes sense once you look at it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But one of the challenges of that is like, what if that's not your values, right? Like, what if you actually just want to be served something, get the job and get in and get out? That's a lot of the stuff of like how I've thought about for both the products. It's been from day one paid, because my belief is that I want to build the kind of thing that is worth paying for. And so I want to work in spaces where trust is paramount, quiet is paramount.
Yeah.
Well, if that's the case, then ads or affiliates, like all of those business models get ruled out. Okay. And then what you're left with is the consumer has to pay. So now this is a hard challenge. You have to build a product worth paying for, but that is a challenge I'd rather be up for, get my team all fired up by it. So that's what I mean by like what you have to be very thoughtful about from like, and very consistent from start to finish. What I'm talking about now as we're thinking about AI and et cetera, take Google Maps, for example. Here in the Bay Area, people will recognize there's sort of like two freeways in the peninsula. There's the 280 and then there's the 101. Okay. The 101's like the very efficient. It's the one with all the billboards. It gets you to the airport. It's also sort of soulless, right? It's like, the very classic kind of freeway. The 280, on the other hand, actually follows the San Andreas Fault, which I try not to think about, but it is gorgeous rolling hills. It is peaceful. It is pastoral. It is like, I forget that I'm commuting 40 minutes into the city. And where we live, it's almost equidistant. It's a little bit faster to go on the 101, but it's generally equidistant to go either way. I have to tell Google Maps every single time that I would rather take the 280 because I would rather, upwards to 10 minutes difference, right? Yeah. I would rather take the one that enables me to have a more like mindful kind of mindset and all that kind of stuff. There is no feature that allows me to express over a longer period of time my preference for the way I like to drive. Right. So that's just a small example. And if we think about that in a lot of our technology, there is, when I say tech is presuming, I mean very specifically, there are a lot of products that are presuming that I want efficiency or productivity or time saving. And that in some cases, that is absolutely true. Maybe I've got a meeting in the city and I absolutely have to get there.
But you get to choose that. Right.
I get to choose it. I get to choose it.
Yes.
And so that's one thing that's missing that I really think that we need to bring back.
I really love your articulation of choosing to go on the 280, right? And the rolling hills. And I loved you talked about trust and quiet, right? Trust me, I really want to enjoy my drive. And I think when we are the, efficiency, productivity, time saving, when that is constantly in my face, I start to think, oh, I have to be this way. I have to. And I think that I love that, what we talk about is in our coaching is when we're helping women get to their next chapter, is like, you get to choose the pathway forward. And you're going to have a lot of people telling you what you should be doing, but it's really in that slowing down. It's in the quiet. It's in the trust in self. It's in that drive on the 280 and being like, and letting nature help inform you. So I love this. So you're reminding us, make sure your tech has a place for you to have your preferences.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it's also an invitation to imagine better and demand better. I want to point to, when I say reimagine futures, I want to point to tech itself is not evil. Capitalism itself is not evil. Like these things can be built in other ways. Yes. But to do that, you would have to have different builders.
And who do we want to invite into this more? And I think that this is where women can really step into the invitation of, one, where you and I also talked about sort of understanding the power of our purse, understanding the power of our ability to problem solve, understanding our ability to ask for others to help us, and to do this all. And there's an invitation here that is, just the theme of this year is that to have women really fully embrace the power of what we can do to create the futures that we want, right? What comes up for you when I say those things?
Oh, so much. Like right now, we're actually living in a super exciting time, except it
Yes.
doesn't feel like that because it feels very noisy.
Mm-hmm.
And what I'm thinking a lot about is the uneven journey and experience of AI for a lot of different people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, for me, my point of view is not, oh my gosh, AI is like the best thing since sliced bread. My point of view is I've been toiling for 10 years in categories and spaces that are margin challenged, that don't pay the people doing the good work nearly enough, that are resource constrained in ways that most people can't even imagine. And if there is some way to unlock real solutions, well, I'm all for it. And for me, from what I can see, AI can be that thing. And so that's why I'm an advocate for it.
Yeah.
But what is happening right now is that there's like all of this noise around, like have you been using this and have you learned this and all of that. And then tied to very real concerns that we do need to talk about, but like data centers and climate and all of these different pieces. And what is getting lost in the wash is a ability to kind of understand and hold on to what the potential is while also engaging on where the challenges are. And so even just one example, like,
yes, I was going to say, give us an example.
Yeah. Well, so right now, and by like my background, like over the last 10 years, I've been working with incredible engineers, building great engineering teams to be able to build the companies that I have. And in the last 6 months, because I just finally sat down and I was like, another friend kind of, and by the way, this is one of the most incredible things about women. Women are always endlessly generous to help another woman with just a little tip.
Yes.
It could be parenting. It could be like whatever, like makeup. It doesn't actually even matter.
But coming on their podcast when you don't even know them. I mean, seriously, this is what has been such a blessing and just sheer joy for me is reaching out and no one says no.
Exactly.
So yes, I agree.
What I see that's possible is like that, but that is not using other paid products with like other kinds of like UI that might try to make it easier because I can do it if somebody can help me get to that kind of point. And so what I'm really excited about is what's possible is that if we can get enough women comfortable enough at this level, I'm not talking about like full on go learn how to code. I'm also not talking about just using sort of like UI friendly products, but I am talking about the level of like a Claude Code or like a Cursor or like a Codex kind of thing. If we can get more women there, then I think the most exciting thing can happen, which is the people closest to the problem get to start building purpose-built products for themselves. And I don't care if this is your little league schedule that you need to it to read and populate and send a little link to everyone else. I don't care if it's your family recipes that you like then dictate and then it goes into a place or like any number of different things. Now it's up to your imagination and your own ability to build. And so that's what comes up for me when you talk about that.
It gets me incredibly excited as well. If we can invite each other into new ways of thinking about tech, new ways of thinking about we understand the problem, we can help create the solutions that we want to see. And I think this is what you've done. And what was the one thing that you were grappling with? I just love that part.
One of the biggest challenges is that as a product designer, I've been trained and taught that friction is the enemy. I've been trained to look and see where there's friction in everyday lives and build products that eliminate it. The challenges of the last 10 years, as I kind of looked at our spaces that are actually like relational friction, that's not bad friction. That is actually the glue that binds us together. And the analogy I use in the TED Talk is around this clay piece that my daughter had built. And, to join two of the pieces together, you actually have to score each haphazardly for them to grip onto each other.
Right.
And what we're doing with our technology right now is we're sort of smoothing the pieces and we're surprised when we're sort of sliding past each other. And so what was happening was like, there was like all sorts of different examples. But one was like, take school newsletters, right? And, that could be lots and lots of friction. But what is also embedded in there is the love that a teacher writing a note has in there, or a principal who's very proud of an initiative, or all that kind of stuff. It is okay to be frustrated by the volume of stuff coming at us. And we need to find a way that isn't just, I never want to see any of this ever again. Although I will pause and say, if that is your values, then have at it. But that is not mine. That is not mine. And so we need technology to do two things. To first recognize that how your values might differ from my values. And second of all, to understand that my values or my choices might differ on a Tuesday night versus a Sunday night.
Absolutely.
Right? And so that was a lot about like what that talk was about, which is like, I have come into this space as a very classic, like I am going to go build a thing and is going to solve all the things. And the journey I've had to go through is very humbling, as I've had to understand this, is a big problem and it has to get solved. But by the way, it's not going to get solved just by capitalism and just private enterprise. We're going to have to like work with like advocacy and policy and all sorts of like different academia. And then this part is actually like the love.
Yes, I just said the essence. Like friction.
Yes. And so that, especially with AI, which is going to make things faster and more efficient, I do want AI to work on this heap.
Yes.
But I need to teach the AI how to protect and back off.
For Avni.
For my way.
For her.
For me.
For your way.
For me.
Let's back up. Tell everybody what Milo is. And so we can understand fully this gift, because I work with so many women who are trying to hold it all together, which is actually going to lead us into our second chapter, is like, it's messy. What is Milo, first of all? Give us a quick top line.
Yeah. So the way to describe Milo is to first describe Poppy, which was the first company that I built. And so, again, I mentioned that my exploration really is rooted in what is missing and my belief of like what creates like a really great future that I want to build towards. And that is really through the lens of village. And so what Poppy was that I have a great belief that there's lots of really great people that live in our communities. What we're lacking is an ability to actually connect to them. And so the V1, the chapter 1, was really how do we use technology to connect to the people? And by that time, my girls were starting school. And so I was starting to get this influx, which there absolutely is an inflection when your kids start school. And so then I became interested in how do you share the invisible load in a different way? And so that journey, this precedes AI in the sense of like, the large language models as we know them that like launched in the fall of 2022. I was starting this in 2019, where I was like, okay, this is a continuation of mission, but I want to understand and be more focused. I think, and I now know, we're using women's brains as the computers to run our families and our communities. Mm-hmm. How about we build an actual computer that is better built for it, and we can give our brains a break? And so that was generally the thesis. The other organizing principle was like, I grew up watching the Jetsons. And like, if you think about Rosie as just a organizing principle, I was like, well, who's building that? Like, who's building the thing that can be the place where either my husband or I or my mom or whatever, there can be the information kind of in this place that can be accessed as needed. And so that was sort of like the design that I was trying to go towards. Lots and kind of nooks and crannies, because as you can imagine, the invisible load is like a really gnarly thing. If you think about childcare, we know what the problem is. We know what the solution is. It's just really hard to scale in a good, affordable way. Yeah. The invisible load is the opposite. We don't actually know what the problem is. We don't really know what the solution is. But if you could figure it out, it scales beautifully, right? Like you could figure out a way to be able to make and serve lots of different people. What the last 4 years has been, man, to say we were early is, an underestimation. We were trying to build something, what we now know as agentic, 4 years ago. Wow. And so our team has had to like invent thing after invent thing, while we're also trying to understand like, what is the best product? And so what Milo is like essentially what I want, which is over SMS, just something as basic as SMS. Mm-hmm. Can you just send all the different things? It could get organized and like, what is it? Who needs to know? Any of those types of things. It gets to the calendar, it gets to to-dos. Right. But more than that, it has my back. It has my back on understanding what does it all mean, so that you look at my calendar and you're just parroting back stuff, which by the way, I'm not going to like getting that screenshot into there is important, but I want someone or something that can understand the importance of what it all means.
Yeah, I do love that. You often refer to kind of going back to parenting to 1999, right?
Mm,
Where we weren't so, like, there wasn't so much coming at us. We didn't have to go through all those things. But now, as parents, we do. We have to know, like, where all the things are at what time and all the things. So it's sort of like helps you filter out so that you
hmm
can parent like it's 1999. How can I use technology to give me back time that is valuable? For me to play a board game, for
hmm
me to go on a walk. So yeah, I like this parenting, like going back to 1999.
One thing that I've observed is like, why are we all yearning for 1999? Because if you actually think about it, like there are lots of different ways that like lots of progress, right? Like there was only that one soccer team and the one kind of whatever it was. And for all the kids who didn't want to play soccer, like you're sort of like SOL, right?
Right.
I think what we're yearning for is boundaries again. Again, if I was going to say tech with a capital T, with all of these different types of business models, what has happened is we've designed out all boundaries.
Yeah.
And so for YouTube or like for any of these types of things, I have to be the boundary for my kids and for myself. Like I
Yeah.
literally have one of those like little brick things and all
Yeah.
that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
What we're yearning for in our analog versions is not
Mhm.
the analog thing per se. It's
No.
boundaries out of our products that we can trust again. So
Yeah.
if again we had products that had some of that, I think
Mm.
like we're happy with the progress. It's
Yeah.
just that like I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted of like my willpower having to be in the fight of like
Yes.
having
The
to impose
fight.
some of those boundaries.
Right, right. I love that. So again, going back to preferences, aligned to values, choice, choosing your pathway forward. We don't need to regress. Be in the now, have technology that allows us to choose how we want to be. How many companies have you been a part of in a startup?
3 so far.
Three. And yes, so far. I love that. Of course. We'll wait. We'll watch this
Yeah.
space. And then your husband has his own business. You've got two girls under the age of,
One's 11 and one just turned 14.
and they're what, 20 some odd months apart, or how many years apart are they?
They're 20, like they're almost exactly 24, like 2.5 years apart.
Drinking
Yep.
from the fire post. So let's talk about, what it's like to be a dual working family, which many of our clients are. Chaotic, lots going on, choosing to have a lot going on, sometimes choosing not. Like
Mhm.
what is it life like? I think we have this vision of like, wow, she just must be so super organized. And look, she's building a tool to help us keep us even more, what is it actually like to live this life? And what is important to you to share with our listeners?
Yeah. So I think the funny thing is a lot of people think I'm organized because I'm building something like that. And it's almost like the opposite is true. It's because I'm not organized that I need something else to be able to do it
You
all in
saw
a
the
very simple
problem
way.
and you're
Yeah.
building a tool for it. I love
Yeah.
that.
I think this is such a complex question and such an important question because if you asked me, oh, the girls are now 11 and 14. I started the first company. I started Poppy when the youngest was 4 months old and the oldest was like 3 years. And like one might question my sanity in doing that. But at the time we were living in Seattle, I had the opportunity to get funded by Y Combinator, which for those who don't know is one of the most like, and this is back in 2015, 2016. So certainly like preeminent kind of not only just investment, but like when you think about you want to be amongst the best minds to be able to help grow your idea and like build it into something that matters and can have impact, that's where you want to go. The challenge was that they had a strong requirement that everyone had to live in Mountain View, which is where their the batches were being run. And I don't have to tell you that the number of women with kids doing this cohort or batch was like probably like single, like not even single digits. I'm talking about like one or two, right? Like I think there's probably another 2 other women that had kids. And in this scenario, this is not a like, do I ask for like, modifications or all that kind of stuff? It's just like you say yes. And then you hold a team meeting with your family. And I still remember having this meeting with my husband, my parents, and our nanny. And I was like, listen, this is going to be an incredible opportunity. it's really important. It's going to be, but for these 12, call it 14, 15 weeks, I am going to be completely MIA. And again, to remember, by this time, the youngest was 14 months. So just weaned, just like, 14 months and like about to be 4. And so that was very critical. And I only go into this story because one of the red threads throughout this whole period has had to be really hard but transparent conversations. As my husband, at the time, my husband was at a company employed. And then since then, he's also become an entrepreneur, building his own company, incredible company that's now public. What has happened is like we joke, but it's like 2 companies, 2 kids. It's all manners of crazy. I joke that, but what I actually mean to say is like we've had to become so clear about what is important to us and what are our non-negotiables, right? Yeah. So if there is anything with the girls, we actually have conversations with the teachers every beginning of the year, and we're very honest. We'll say to them, we are very engaged parents. We want to understand, like we'll volunteer where we can. But we're also have these really amazing like work lives. If you are ever feeling that the girls are off a little or whatever, we want to know, because that is the most important thing. And we see this as a team. You and us are a team. Yes. We want the same thing. And so we have had that conversation with every single teacher, every single nanny. We have an incredible village of our own that we have worked very hard to cultivate. So I don't know how other people do it, but certainly for us, it has been like non-negotiables, hard conversations, and honoring the effort of like how all of this stuff happens. And I mean, it's been hard. Both my husband and I, like my work has been based out of the US, his based in Canada, the 2 kids across the places. Yeah. But if you keep that in mind, it actually simplifies things.
If you've been listening for a while, you understand. And if you're a client of mine, you're laughing because you know exactly what I'm about to say. But when we begin our coaching engagements with our clients, we have a designed relationship at the very beginning. And I will say to them, I'm about to give you the most important tool of your entire life. In the first 5 minutes of the coaching, you still have 6 coaching sessions. You cannot get a refund. Here we go. It is how to design a relationship with the other people in your lives. And it's an agreement. It's a contract.
Can I interject just to say this has been a journey for me as well, because I, in the very early years, assumed the role of my mom. And I just assumed that she would come in anytime our nanny was sick or anytime we would like have childcare gaps. Right. I would just assume that she was ready and willing to just kind of like fill in. Yeah. And even in times that we had in between like nannies and things like that. What I soon understood, because I either had to like understand this and she helped me understand this, was she really loved her role as a grandmother. And I was not letting her be in that role. And what I needed to do was find full-time childcare and let her be grandma. And that in the earliest years was like a really important revelation to me, because it was on 2 sides. One, the assumption that she was just kind of, because it was like tidy and it was my vision of village, my definition of it, but not hers. And when we did that, and when we had clarification of like, then man, it lit everyone up. Everyone was sort of in the places that they needed and they all worked better. Not to say that it's static, and it always is, but that was such a fundamental thing, and it ties into what you're talking about.
Yes. So I heard that you're redesigning. I also heard trust in self, of knowing what you need, but also trusting others that they can have these conversations with you. And that maybe the teachers were like, well, yes, and this is how it's going to look or whatever. And so it is a contract. It's a design. It kind of goes back to sort of, what we're talking about in terms of this modern life is just realizing that what we think is, well, I guess it goes back to the dawn of time, but our lived reality is not the same as somebody else's. And so we get to get curious and actually need to be wildly curious and be okay with it being different for somebody else. And that it's a design, it's a contract. And it is what is, I think, what relationships are all about.
Man, if you want to know what it was actually like to be building this, when the girls are like 1 and 4, it's all doubt. It's all doubt. It's all like, am I failing them as a mother? Am I supposed to be here? Am I supposed to like, and what I had to like ease into is my belief and my faith that what we're doing is ultimately the very best thing that I could do for them, which is to model what being big and bold and like taking big swings at things. And that's the best thing I could do for them. But now at 11 and 14, they are active participants in our family, but even on like the companies and stuff like that. We'll bring these problems to like the dinner table and say like, how would you think about this? Or I need to design a new logo or whatever. And both of us will kind of like do that. And they are now active participants, but we are also very vocal with our everyday values. We still haven't gotten to a place where we like write it down and like I've always wanted to, but we say the values in almost like an oral ritual, which is an oral tradition, which is like, we're a sharing family or always an adventure, right? Meaning for like all the different ways that things go sideways, like, it's always an adventure. One thing that has had to come up over the last couple of years is do one thing well. Because I've realized that there has been so many times that I've tried to, like, I can still remember this one weekend. It was Mother's Day weekend, but I was due to be in the Bay Area. So I convinced my husband that we should bring the girls down to the Bay and we would do both. And I realized like I did neither well that weekend. I wasn't there for the girls and I didn't show up for this thing. And I was like, never again. We are a family that does like one thing well, and that is going to be hard choices. But now the girls, when they're having to choose between like sports or a birthday party or any number of different things, as you can imagine, like at a Bay Area school, like the number of things they could do, like robotics versus tennis team and stuff. And we sit down very intentionally and we say, we are going to honor our commitments, but we are going to do one thing well. And what is that one thing? You could be like, it's not that you have to get it right. Like for this period of time, you're going to go do this thing.
I think that's very well said. And I will add, what I love is that you added that it's a new value. And you may have dropped some of the values that were when they were little. And I think some people are like, but that's our family value. And it's like, yeah, but
it evolves.
We are creatures that evolve. So why still serve that value master? It's only going to show up as irritability, frustration, annoyance. It shows up in very, negative ways. What I also heard you just say is sometimes people have to cross the line to know where the line is. Could you explain a little bit more about that? Because one, Milo is helping us do that with the preferences. What does that mean to you in your family? Talk to us about what the line is and crossing it to really find out where the line is.
So this is probably like the title of the chapter of my last, like probably 3 years, which is to say, like I came into even more than 3 years. Like, again, I mentioned this, I came into the space with the presumption that I didn't know what the role of technology was, but I just presumed that if I could build it, I was naturally going to make it better, right? Like it could be made better. And what I've then realized was like, actually, if I want to be connected to my community, if I want to have this feeling of village, if I want to share the load, they are not all technology problems, and at least not for the way that I want to live it. And so let me give a couple of examples. For the village kind of piece of it, I mentioned that we moved to the Bay 2 years ago, and this would have been a perfect time. I lost like having my parents a 20-minute drive away. I lost our nanny of like, so many years. And yet, because we had some of these mechanisms where we had like neighbor night every week and we had schools that you bike the kids to and you got to know a lot of different people, I, in short order, had probably 6 or 7 different families that the girls knew that I could text, and that there was sort of this like very established like trust that they would be there if I needed them to be. And so then that made me reconsider. I was like, for sure, there are places that I could still build something that can help, but that's not the only, or that's not like the best way to be able to build trust in some of these other things. I might actually have to invest in other places. And that's led me to invest in things like coaching football, because I've actually realized that my line lies in a different place, that I didn't like the feeling of sort of hitting buttons and having some kind of like, again, it's the same thing. I used to have a lot of those meal prep kits, because I wanted to just like have like, for dinner, just make it really easy. I love cooking. And what I realized was in time, I had lost all connection to actually what was being made, and like, that whole kind of thing. I had lost a piece of that. We had our after school sitter kind of be doing those, and it was all very efficient. and all very like nice, but I was feeling a piece of disconnection. And so I stopped that and I started doing much simpler recipes on the weeknight. And that sounds crazy, but I crossed a line I didn't want to.
Well, what I hear is you've tapped into the ick, right? Like it was speedy, it was efficient, but there was something that was vibrating in you. We talk a lot about body wisdom, that you're like, what is the value that's being stepped on right here? And it's like, wow, I really actually like to cook. And I want to, maybe I want to share that with the girls. So really when you start to, and it could have been a value back then, you really did need efficiency, maybe for a couple months, but the it started to creep in. And so we always, remind our clients that the body is very, very intelligent. And it is trying to share with you, hey, you've crossed the line. You've crossed that boundary. Come back. And what is the new line? And it doesn't mean the old line was bad. It was very helpful at a moment. But now that's actually, what's the new value?
But you're talking about a really important thing, which is what I believe as well, with our like sort of preoccupation with like all sorts of data. And I'm not, again, this is not a value judgment, because like I think like I have an Oura ring, I have an Apple Watch, like the collection of data is not in and of itself a bad thing. What I have, what I'm starting to take, not issue, at least for myself, is like, if you try to focus too much on the external data, that is shutting off your own body's intuition.
Right.
To understand, like, and so it's like a proxy that feels right, but doesn't feel right, if you know what I'm saying, right?
Absolutely.
And so what you're talking about is re-energizing the muscle of noticing. And so I am like, for one, as long as you're engaging and noticing. And that is my point around AI and technology right now. Have your issues with the data centers, have your issues with copyright, have your issues with screens or whatever else you want, but engage. Right. Have an informed, engaged point of view, saying like, I did let my kids, or I did use like, notebooks on history textbooks on the computer. And then I had them do it. And this is actually a real thing. Like they have them on their computers, and then I actually get the actual textbook from the teacher, and I have them do it and handwrite some things out, and then notice for your own self, right? Make the call for your own self.
I love that. It's in the noticing. It's the slowing down. It's the pausing to gain clarity. It's you driving on 280, right? Yep. It's like, and that's why we created our retreats. We hope that women can do this on their own, as they go throughout their day, but we remove women from the chaotic natures of their lives. We put them in a place that's beautiful. We allow them to slow their vibration. And that's when creativity, that's when choice can really come in. And actually, it's almost like a megaphone. It's like, they'll come back from doing an exercise that we have them doing. And they're like, you will not believe what became so clear to me. And so we hope that through the coaching and through the podcasts like this, that women will, and it kind of goes back to, therapy, self-awareness, radical self-reflection. And let's hope that younger women can do this sooner than, I often say it's wisdom, it laps around the sun. But I'm noticing like 20-something women are actually really taking this time to take a digital detox. They're not rejecting the tech altogether, but they're putting the boundaries around it that honor who they are and to protect themselves.
I get the privilege of talking to all sorts of different people across the country, different ages, all that kind of stuff. And one thing I'm so encouraged about is folks in their 20s and 30s, and this could be like men, women, I see couples, the conversations that they're having with their partners earlier, the self-awareness, all of that stuff is like so much better than like, certainly my generation or like my age friends were doing. And one of the things that I am most afraid of is like one of the topics is around having kids, right? Especially for women, because the way that it is portrayed is like, how could you possibly? And I get it. Listen, I get it. I live it. But what I also understand is if it is like deeply aligned to your values that you choose not to have children or be child-free, amazing. I super support you. What I'm talking about though, is there's a good significant part of people that are concerned from a, like almost the fear of it, like the fear of like the climate change, or how could I'm going to lose myself. And like, is my partner going to show up and do the things? And all very, very valid and real kind of concerns. But what has happened in today's world, again, all of that noise is dominating versus what I think is like the lived reality of like, yep, super crazy. And it's like all the different things. And man, those two kids are like the most, like they're my favorite people in the world. It's like the hardest thing to communicate, to say, I know from the outside, this seems unreasonable and untenable. But how do we also get the message across where, it's this ultimate leap of faith that also ends up with like kind of like the richest reason you could really kind of do anything.
And also not falling in and making it binary. Like, in your 20s and early 30s, it may feel like that. And I think it's interesting with science and technology. We women, we get to have babies later. There's also, pluses and minuses to that. But don't be like, well, I can't change my mind. Mm-hmm. We get to change our mind. And because we are further informed. And it goes back to allowing us to really slow down and talk about our values. Now, I would love for us to just talk about values. And you share what was going on the week that you were doing your TED Talk. Because I think this is you guys have to listen to TED Talk. It's such a beautiful story. And it's a woman who's standing so confidently and firmly into speaking your purpose. And you worked really hard on it and you fucking nailed it. Excuse my language, everybody. I mean, she was on fire. But what was happening going on there? Because it was important to you to deliver this, but there was something else going on. And you all as a family had to make some choices. So tell us quickly about the story about your TED Talk and your preparation and what happened that week.
Yeah. So the TED Talk for me was one of these incredible honors. Like for me, I've listened to TED Talks for years. It was on my oh my gosh, maybe someday kind of list. And when I was asked to give the TED Talk, and the topic was like the provocation, at least, was in the age of AI, what are parents for? And I was like, oh my goodness, like what a question. And how can I have a idea that does justice to that stage, but also what I believe and can be communicated in some kind of helpful way in 8 minutes. And so, it's probably the single hardest thing I've worked on, because it was just like over and over again is like refining, and is like, is this it? Is this it? Until I was holding a talk that I felt so proud of, because it was me. It was like my truth to be able to kind of deliver.
It showed.
And then I rehearsed. And I was like, we flew into Vancouver the week before. It was going to be delivered on Wednesday night, flew in on Friday night. And my parents live in Vancouver. So we actually dropped off the kids to my parents. And then my husband and I went to the hotel near the convention center. The next morning, on Saturday morning, my husband got a call from his sister. And we found out that his dad had suffered a massive heart attack and was in the ICU. And as you can imagine, this is Saturday morning. And it's one of those things that, you can talk about all of the biggest ambitions you have in your life and all the big things and all of that kind of stuff. But these are the moments that actually kind of matter, right? Being there, and my husband's family is just outside of Toronto. So, would have required, going back east. And it was one of these moments where, you really had to have a conversation at the time, there was nothing else to be done. He had his sisters there, and everyone was kind of taking care of things. And so we were sort of on hold. And so the biggest thing that we could do was just proceed. And so I did head in the game, go forward with what the plan was. At the same time, was like, okay, I just talked to my husband, if you need to go, this is so clearly the thing you need to do. But he was like, nope, I'm here, I'm supporting. And this is what he would also want. And so, he was hanging on all throughout that week, but it's hard to talk, but when you're doing something really hard, and anyone who's ever done anything hard as a marathon or like anything physical or like, it doesn't really matter what it is. I think they're in a state of heightened emotions anyways, because you're vulnerable. You've worked so much on something. So you're in, and then for anyone who's had the chance to go to like the TED conference or anything like it, it's a beautiful kind of place full of people who let you be your vulnerable self. So it was like also like a very specific kind of like environment to be in.
Right.
That all said, so, we're approaching Wednesday. My father-in-law is like hanging in there, talking to my sisters-in-law and kind of on like an hourly kind of basis. And that Wednesday night, I don't know how he did it, right? Like, I don't know how he knew to show up to be there for me and be there for his family and be there for himself, right? Like through all of this kind of stuff. And so that's still something that I'm like in awe of him about. But on Wednesday night, I knew the best way that I could honor my father-in-law was to go up there and do the thing. And so I think there was a lot of that as well, which is like, I felt very prepared. But I was also sort of like, I felt, and I'm getting goosebumps right now, like I felt like that was my best way that I could honor him. And so I got up there, gave that talk. I had the best time of my life in the sense that like, what I am now most proud of is not necessarily the words or saying like TED Talk speaker or any of those types of things that I might have thought. It is that I was present for all 8 minutes. Like I was there and I was like, I can tell you that was like, I was present for those 8 minutes. And that was an incredible night. That night was also the evening of the dinner with this incredible women's group. And so all of that just to say that was probably one of the highest highs of my life.
I hear a lot of things in that. I love being present and not wanting to miss the moment, aligned with your values, being on purpose, right? But actually just staying. You stayed in the moment and you chose how you wanted to show up. And when we actually do that work of thinking through those things, like what's important here that matters and how do I want to show up to meet it? And what was the impact actually on your audience? If you could like look back, what was it like to watch them receive it? Because I'm sure that you had an impact on them, not just because of the words or whatever, but you all, I'm sure, felt connected. What's that like to be so connected?
There's no way to kind of describe it. I mean, I've given talks before, but and this is a cathedral for talks, right? Like it is a TED Talk stage. And so to describe it, it was built for that. But there was an intimacy also, Kelly Corrigan, who is the incredible mastermind behind this session. I can't even tell you, like all of that contributed to it. And then I had these incredible people in the audience who were there for me. So feeling the connection, it was like electric. And I know that sounds sort of cliched, but the air was alive. Like I can still feel it. I can still sense it. And when you have the chance to experience those things, people did come up to me and afterwards and say, yes, like, I'm very grateful that like, it was a well-delivered talk. But what I'm most proud of is people felt that I had fun. Like people felt that I had the time of my life doing that. And they felt me being present in the moment. And I didn't realize you could do that. Like I didn't realize you could feel that as an audience member.
I love that. And they celebrated you and you were celebrating yourself. I mean, like this is, I think that another way of showing up to live a meaningful life is to be impressed with ourselves. I did something hard. I freaking crushed it. I felt connected. I could see it had impact. And if you hadn't have ever put yourself out there or done the work to get it there, and I even think, having the purpose to think about your father-in-law. Anyhow, it's just a really special story. I'm really glad that you shared it because I think to me, it also goes back to that designed relationship that you and your husband were so connected. There wasn't guilt that you were doing it. It was honor. And also sounds like there was a great design with the sisters, right? Nobody was wishing you hadn't been there. Why did you do that? I mean, like there was great clarity around so many people showing up and behaving on their values.
Yeah. And I think that's what I'm most grateful of. But what I also recognize is, so then that was that Wednesday night, and Thursday morning, my husband got the call that my father-in-law had passed. And so again, it is this like roller coaster of having like the highest highs and then some of the lowest lows, not even having to endure that. But like what is so clear and true to me is that the only way you can go through that journey and that roller coaster is with those people, right?
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
the only way I know how to do that is to be as genuine and authentic as you can possibly be with those people. And again, I'm not saying that this is perfect, not by a long shot,
Right.
but that's the only thing. Like, I have such gratitude for my sisters-in-law, my mother-in-law, like my husband. And the last thing I'll say on this is that this is personal for everyone. So there was a orchestra that played in one of the sections in the TED, programming, and everything was dark. And there, I got to, as a speaker, kind of sneak into dress rehearsals and stuff like that. And so this orchestra was rehearsing before they were going to go on later that day. And I snuck in and I just sat at the back, and it was dark, and there was no one else really there. There was just a couple of the people, and they were playing. And that was my moment to connect with my father-in-law. And that was like, I didn't actually get a chance to go to the funeral later that week, lots of other reasons, but I felt a connection in my own way, in my own moment. And I think that's what I'm trying to convey here, which is like, not like the specifics of this week, not the specifics of like any of this, but it's just to say, in a world, in a time that it feels all very noisy and all very extra, all I'm trying to do for me and then for our little family and our community is just show up in a way that I think can be just true. And like, where does that truth get anchored? And that's the thing that I'm just trying to figure out.
And I think we should leave it at that. That is such a beautiful way of closing this, is how can you show up to live the life that you want and be anchored in it, know your boundaries, know where your line is, walk it back if you didn't get it right. And I actually do want to just bottom line one more theme that we've had here, and that is for women to realize their potential in helping to shape the future of where we're going. If women truly saw themselves as capable of shaping the future instead of simply surviving this, what would change? What would change for us?
Everything. I mean, everything. No, and I think this is what I want this next chapter of my mission to look like, which is I've had this beautiful chance for 10 years to go see a problem and then figure out how to amass like a team and capital and all this kind of stuff to go solve it. I think in this moment, with what the tools are that are available to us, how could I help individuals that are living the problems themselves, help them actually go solve it for themselves? And I think with that, I truly believe like everything's possible.
Everything is possible. If there's somebody listening who has a really great idea, but doesn't really know how to unlock it, what advice do you have for them? Or what nugget?
Like so much. First of all, just break it down and get started, right? Like, I think we have, all of us, so many great ideas. And sometimes you need to like talk it through with a friend, or like, even if you don't, because like sometimes these little ideas are like too crazy to even voice it, but just take a sheet of paper. Like I walk around with like pieces of paper like this, and I'll be sketching things all over the place. Just write it down. Like, what am I trying to solve? And how might I be able to do that? Okay, I'm a little bit stuck here. Let's come back to that. And like, what would happen if I'm successful? Like there's a couple of things that I really love. One thing is live in the future and build what's missing. What I love about that is it is steeped in possibility. Think about a future that you can believe in, that you could get really excited about, and what is missing. And how would you build that? How would you work your way backwards?
I freaking love it. You're awesome. I have kept you way too long. I've kept our listeners, well, hopefully they've loved every minute of it. Avni, thank you so much for sharing all that is you, and all the messy, and all the, ways that you break down and think about problem solving, for saying yes to me when we really didn't know each other. We do have a mutual friend in common, and that's Kelly Corrigan. She's my new Montana friend. So, so I am excited that I can count you in my circle now. And I really am internally grateful for your wisdom and helping us shed some shoulds and step more fully into creating the life that we want. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for having me.
You're so welcome. Wow, that was a lot. There's so many amazing nuggets. The ones that are coming up for me that I'll just leave you with is, how do we use technology to quiet the noise, not of how we should live, but instead to build and use technology that allows for personal preferences. And what will that get us? Technology that will then be aligned with my personal values. And that way I can actually use the technology to live more meaningfully and joyfully based on what my set of values are, the way I want to live my life. So that's amazing. I love that. And then the second one was a call to action for women. And I feel like Avni is allowing us to dream and think of what we want in the future. So live in the future, but then come back to today and build for what is missing. We are problem solvers. Let's go and create the tech and the type of world that we want and we need based on what we're seeing the solutions to be. Wow, I love it. I can't wait to process all of this. I hope you all have a great day. Thanks for hanging with us. I'll see you on the other side of your shoulds. Take care. Bye-bye. Beyond Should is creatively supported by a team of dynamic women. Thank you to our executive producer, Lauren Lagrasso, our producer, Daniela Silva, our marketing manager, Esty McInnes, and our TMC curriculum design director, Katie Craig. Without these women, we would not be able to bring you this dynamic content. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Beyond Should, just one of the many ways we are working to support women from all walks of life. And we know personally, and from what our clients are sharing with us on the daily, that this is a dynamic and challenging time we are living through. And if you are feeling frustrated or out of control with your current work situation or life in general, and feel like something is just waiting for you, just beyond your reach or clarity, but you can't put your finger on what it is, then perhaps you might consider taking on a coaching engagement with us at the Murmuration Collective. We are professionally trained and certified leadership, career, and life coaches. We support women like you to wade through the confusion and find what they are truly seeking in the next chapters of their personal and professional lives. Our contact details are in the show notes. We look forward to meeting you, hearing your story, and seeing how we might be able to support you further. Be well.